Okay, let's jump right into this. Welcome to our latest explainer, where today we're tackling what is, without a doubt, the single most fiercely debated transfer in the entire history of football. For 70 straight years, the saga of Alfredo Di Stéfano has been an absolute battlefield between Real Madrid and Barcelona. If you ask one side, it's undeniable proof of a political robbery by a dictatorship. Ask the other, and it's just a convenient myth cooked up to hide sheer boardroom incompetence. So what are we doing today? Our goal is strictly impartial and investigative. We're going to sift through the noise, cut through the tribalism, and separate documented historical fact from passionate club myth, piece by piece. Picture this scene for a second. It's the summer of 1953, and the undisputed greatest footballer on the planet arrives in Spain. He actually settles down in Barcelona. He even plays in preseason friendly matches, literally wearing the famous Blaugrana colors. The fans are absolutely ecstatic. But then, just weeks later, that exact same player makes his official debut in the pristine white of Real Madrid. And get this, in his very first Clásico, he scores 4 goals against the Barca team he almost signed with. How in the world does a player go from physically wearing one team's shirt to launching a historic dynasty for their fiercest rivals? Section 1. The player and the board. The context of the genius. Now, you have to remember, Di Stéfano wasn't just some unproven rookie with potential. He was a fully formed, absolute superstar, the total package. He could drop back, orchestrate the midfield, and finish like a pure striker. But all that immense talent came wrapped in an incredibly messy web of ownership rights stretching across continents. Here is where the trouble really starts. Di Stéfano originally made his name at River Plate in Argentina, but back in the late 40s, a massive players' strike completely paralyzed Argentine football. Looking for better pay, Di Stéfano joined a huge exodus of stars heading to Colombia, signing with a club called Millonarios in Bogotá. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. This Colombian league had essentially gone rogue. They were operating entirely outside of FIFA's rules, a literal pirate league. To rein in the chaos, international authorities stepped in and signed the Pact of Lima in 1951. This deal basically said, okay, players like Di Stéfano can stay in Colombia until 1954, but after that, their rights legally revert back to their original clubs, which in this case meant River Plate. Section 2. 2 owners, 1 player. The legal trap. So, put yourself in the shoes of a Spanish club in 1953. If you want to buy Di Stéfano, who exactly are you supposed to pay? It was a total paradox. On one side of the coin, you've got River Plate. They're totally backed by FIFA and are legally the future owners. But on the flip side, you have Millonarios. They are the practical, current owners who actually have the guy lacing up his boots in their squad right at that moment. Walk into this blindly and only buy one half of the equation? Well, you're stepping right into a massive legal trap. Section 3. The error and the opportunity. The rival moves. 4.5 million pesetas. Let that sink in. For 1953, that was an absolutely staggering amount of money, and it's exactly what Barcelona agreed to pay River Plate. Barca's lawyer at the time, Ramon Trias Fargas, was a smart guy. He knew River Plate held the official FIFA-recognized rights. He goes in, negotiates the deal, pays the massive fee, and FIFA stamps it with their blessing. Barca proved they were deeply committed to doing things by the book, the legally sound route. They really thought they had the whole thing wrapped up. But then, things go totally off the rails. Convinced they already held the ultimate FIFA trump card, Barca started treating Millonarios with, well, borderline disdain. They threw a ridiculously lowball offer at the Colombians. And to make things even worse, the intermediary Barca hired to negotiate in Colombia was actually tied to Millonarios' fiercest local rival, Santa Fe. Talk about a terrible strategy. But the biggest blunder of them all was that Barca actually brought Di Stéfano over to Spain and started parading him around publicly before they'd even closed the Colombian side of the deal. They essentially ignored the team that practically owned him. Enter Real Madrid's highly opportunistic and visionary president, Santiago Bernabeu. He's watching all of this unfold, and he spots the glaring hole in Barca's strategy. He sees they've completely alienated Millonarios. So what does he do? He just flies a representative out and signs an agreement directly with the Colombians. As this situation is often summarized, Real Madrid didn't steal a finished transfer. They simply occupied the space that Barca left wide open. The end result of all this maneuvering? An impossible institutional deadlock. Barca owned the official FIFA rights from River, while Madrid owned the practical immediate rights from Millonarios. Section 4. The role of the regime. The elephant in the room. Now, we absolutely cannot talk about this deadlock without addressing the authoritarian regime of Francisco Franco. It's easily the most heated, explosive question in the history of Spanish football. Did the dictator personally step in order that Di Stéfano be handed over to Real Madrid? To figure this out, we have to stay totally objective and carefully separate documented structures from unproven conspiracies. Here is the crucial distinction we have to make. On one hand, you have massive documented structural power. The Spanish Federation, the body that had to approve the player's registration, operated entirely under the thumb of a state sports delegation. And get this, right in the middle of this massive saga, the state actually passed a law banning the signing of foreign players entirely. But conveniently, they retained the power to grant exceptions for deals that were already in progress. So did the regime have the structural power to block or permit this transfer? Absolutely, 100%. However, when it comes to a direct order, despite 70 years of journalists and historians digging, there is zero documentary proof of a personal, targeted order from Franco dictating that Di Stéfano had to go to Madrid. In fact, just 3 years prior, those exact same regime structures actually helped Barca sign their own superstar, Kubala. So the state had the power, yes, but a specific written conspiracy, that remains entirely unproven.
Section 5. The Solomonic Solution. The Institutional Collapse.
Things start moving incredibly fast at this point. In August 1953, the state drops the ban on foreigners, holding the keys to any exceptions. Then, staring down this impossible deadlock between Madrid and Barca, the Federation steps in with a ruling on September 15th. And honestly, it is arguably the most absurd compromise in the history of professional sports. By late October, the sheer weight of it completely forces Barcelona's hand. Okay, you have to hear the details of this bizarre fix. The Federation decreed that Di Stéfano would literally alternate seasons between the two clubs for 4 years. Step 1, just share the best player in the world. But here's step 2, and it's the kicker. Real Madrid gets to have him first. Obviously, this completely unworkable, humiliating ruling caused an absolute uproar in Barcelona. Which leads us to step 3. Barca's president, Martí Carretó, facing immense public outrage over a completely botched negotiation, resigns in disgrace. A weakened interim board is forced to step in. And finally, step 4, this interim board just throws in the towel. They completely renounce all rights to Di Stéfano in exchange for Real Madrid refunding them the 4.5 million pesetas they had originally paid to River Plate. The whole shebang collapses and the saga is over.
Section 6. Verdict, Facts, and Myths. The Legacy.
5. That is the monumental number of consecutive European Cups that Real Madrid went on to win starting in 1956. It's a record that has literally never been matched. With Di Stéfano acting as their undisputed engine and leader, Real Madrid transformed from a major Spanish club into a global sporting empire. And frankly, this is exactly why the wound has never ever healed for Barcelona. They didn't just miss out on a good player, they lost the man who would go on to define an entire era of football history. So let's actually map this out clearly and clear the air once and for all. What are the proven facts? The double ownership, the state's foreigner ban, their power to grant exceptions, and Barca's ultimate resignation. That is documented history. Then you have the interpretations. Was the Federation's strictness a sign of deep state favoritism toward Madrid, or was it simply the byproduct of Barca's own incompetence? Those are totally valid, fascinating historical debates. But then we have the unproven myths. Direct orders from Franco, double agents working from the inside to sabotage Barca, outright bribes. If you set aside the tribal emotion, you'll find there's absolutely no documentary evidence to back those claims up. Which brings us to the final, crucial point I want to leave you with today. 70 years later, what does it actually say about us that we so often prefer a simple myth over a messy, complex, documented reality? The real story of the transfer of the century is this fascinating mix of brilliant opportunism, tragic boardroom arrogance, and the heavy, undeniable shadow of an authoritarian state. It isn't a simple story of pure evil robbery, and it certainly isn't a story of total, blameless innocence. But maybe, just maybe, in the highly charged tribalism of sports, a clean, comfortable myth is just easier for us to live with than the messy truth. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the stories you think you know.